It is time to hit social media for our hashtag segment. For that, we'd like to welcome in Megan Brantley, the VP of Research at LikeFolio.com, and we have Fast Market contributor Jenny Horn with us as well. And so Kevin was just talking about the non-farm payrolls being a big deal for basically the markets. Well, I would say the Academy Awards is a pretty big deal for the entertainment space.
It is. So we usually talk about earnings, but of course it is Fang Plus Friday, so we have to talk about Netflix. We talk about this stock all the time, but this is for a little bit of a different reason, because Netflix is really trying to become this content play. The CEO came out and said most of their content they're pushing towards to be originals. This is a big deal. When you think about content generation, of course you think about Disney. Now you kind of think about Amazon Prime actually has the largest selection of video, but it's interesting because Netflix is really spending a lot of their money on making sure they have original content. So it seems like, of course, the Oscars is going to be a big deal because for the first time they're the highest nominated company. They have 24 nominations.
Remember, it used to be HBO. That's how really they got some legitimacy, right? Was when HBO came out with all these movies that caught people's eyes and won awards.
Right, they were winning all these Oscars.
Right, and that gave them big street cred in terms of doing that. Now, can Netflix do that? And here's my question. Does the stock go up if they win Oscars?
Right, because I think it matters more to a Netflix, and they're trying to prove themselves in this space.
Because everything in my world has to come back to trading somehow. I justify everything based on a trade.
Yeah, the stock has to move. Right.
What does that have to do with the stock?
Right, but I mean, I watched all the Best Pictures because I'm like a movie geek, so I did watch the Netflix's Irishman, which is what my first tweet is about, which says, just saw The Irishman on Netflix, enthralling from start to end, but doesn't knock off Joker for Best Picture for me. So I completely agree with this tweet, but Megan, I'm curious to see what your data says about Netflix specifically with the Oscars, because it seems like this could only be a really great thing for them in terms of consumer happiness. Now it seems like not only if you like the movies and content on Netflix, now it's kind of affirmed by all these nominees.
Yeah, I think that Netflix knows that original content is the main driver for consumers whenever they're deciding, what subscription services they want to follow or, just what content they want to consume. And so Netflix is really doubling down, and they've got 2 nominees for Best Picture, I think Marriage Story and The Irishman, like this tweet mentions. And non-surprisingly, these are 2 of the highest individual show mentions for Netflix that we track. But you can see on this chart, these are all of the Best Picture nominees, and these are mentions associated with the Oscars. So these films in association with somebody talking about an Oscars nomination or that it should be the Best Picture, things of that nature. And you can see I'm not necessarily as big of a movie buff as you are, Jenny. I had to Google a lot of these names, and we had to really dive into research to make sure that we were capturing the right things. But you can see that Netflix is competitive, and I think that they actually have the most nominations across the board with 24. Is that right?
Yes,
that is,
24.
Yeah.
That's a disappointing chart because Ford vs. Ferrari was one of my favorites, and that's the lowest on your chart. I mean, you loved that, didn't you, Kevin?
Yes, I did. I like movies based on real. But Megan, here's my question. Because I see everything in my life through the prism of trading, it's a sickness. What is there a good day for Netflix? Good for their stock? Is a bad day for Netflix bad for their stock? How do I personally, Kevin Hinks, meathead, how do I connect the dots between Oscars and stock?
I think that that's more of a stretch for the Oscars. I know that they've spent a lot of money for these Oscars awards campaign. I think that it was estimated they spent over like $70 million just trying to, encourage these award votes. But I think that, so from a money spend, investors may not like that, but you've got to think that they like that consumers are watching this, that they're choosing Netflix, that it's driving new subscription. And so that's kind of what we're watching, and that's what we see. We're seeing new subscriptions for Netflix up about 17% year over year. And you can see this is being driven by original content. When we look across the board at these different streamers, the common pain point is a lack of new original content. And so that's something that Netflix is definitely doubling down on. So you like to see the validation of that good content, and you want to see that continue to drive subscriptions.
Yeah, see, I mean, I think it would be extremely bullish for the stock if they win an Oscar and then come out and say, yeah, and we've got like 5 movies coming up in the next quarter that are coming out, something like that. If you could connect it to future I think that's much more bullish for the stock.
Yeah, because I think a headwind for them has been the quality of their content.
Sure.
Because they put out a lot of content, but I mean, how good is
But
the
it's
content they're
misses.
putting out?
And
exactly.
it's been primarily in the TV show space, not
Yes.
necessarily in the movie
Movies.
space.
Right, but Megan, you hit on a really good point because you mentioned spending money, and that brings up two words that investors really care about, and that's cash burn, which actually goes into our next tweet, which says Netflix's free cash flow burn over the last 5 years has been colossal, but Netflix does have the lead in nominations. They have that going for them. Netflix wins just 2 Golden Globes despite receiving 34 nominations. So it was 24. I fact-checked this tweet, but like we mentioned, of course, they're spending a lot of money to do this, and their library is smaller than it's ever been. They're smaller than Amazon Prime Video's library. It's down from, at the peak was 11,000 different titles in 2012. They're down about 50% from that, so they're smaller than they've ever been. Could this be a bad thing in terms of viewers?
Jumping in here, so it looks like this is talking about Golden Globes, which I think already happened.
Right.
So they had 34 and must have only won just 2. But Jenny, let's think about this. I don't know the correlation between Golden Globes and Academy Awards or Oscars, but you watched all these movies.
I did.
And so is your best picture The Joker?
It is.
Okay, and so The Joker leads with 11 different nominations by film. I believe that's under Warner Brothers Studio, which I think falls under AT&T ultimately. But the second most is actually The Irishman with 10. It's tied for second with a couple other films, but The Irishman is Netflix's big film of last year. So I mean, they're all in on this Irishman in terms of this particular awards. And to Jenny's point, they're trying to solidify themselves as a major studio.
Right.
This is much more.
Get that street cred that HBO did.
Exactly.
Right.
Disney doesn't need the street cred.
No.
Sony Pictures doesn't need the street cred. Warner Brothers doesn't. But you know who does is Netflix, and they want it, and they're trying really hard with this Irishman
I'll
film.
tell you the most impressive thing, Jenny Horn fact-checking Twitter. Watch yourself out there on Twitter, because Jenny Horn is checking on you.
I know my movies. I'm a movie buff, yes. And the Golden Globes are not as prestigious as the Oscars, I have to say.
So Megan, bringing this all back together, we've talked about Netflix versus Disney Plus and how Netflix is making its comeback in terms of subscribers, and that's a big piece of it. We want to have a little bit of fun. It is Friday, and there's no earnings to talk about for a while in terms of Netflix, but your thoughts on kind of, hey, going into this, do you agree if they come out as kind of the big winner, is that big for Netflix? Do you think that's going to, lead to more and more kind of motivation to create more content and more subscribers, or is this kind of just a fun topic?
No, I think that there is something to it. I think that this really validates the quality of content, like you mentioned. If they're spending this much money on original content, it better be good content, right? And it better be content that drives subscribers. And so far, we're seeing that positive trajectory, that positive correlation. I think it's also smart that Netflix is realizing that when they focus on original content, they have control of the content. So, they're not trying to dive into this sports or this news or things of that nature. They're focusing on things that they can control. So there's not this sense of betrayal when things leave. I know that I felt personally victimized whenever Friends was stripped from the network. And so even though it's shrinking, I think that, Netflix is being really strategic about the content that they present. And obviously it's reflecting in their happiness levels.
That's right, Megan. If you control the content or if you own it, no one's going to come back and try to renegotiate, right? The content if you own it.
Megan, I was so upset about Friends leaving that I canceled my Netflix. That's how upset.
I can't.
Yeah, that was the deal breaker for me. I was out.
That is a true fan.
I'm still upset. It's still, like you said, that it tugs at my heartstrings.
All that being said, though, Megan, it is approaching back towards the 52-week high. Is currently trading just below 370. So it's been an incredible start to the year for Netflix. We'll see what happens this weekend. But thanks for joining us, and have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks. Y'all too.
Alrighty, thanks to Jenny as well, providing that extra insight for us.